as looming chaos rumbled beneath the sheer fear of the people in various countries. The French Republic in Africa prepared its process to work towards the liberation. Just as Canada, their plan was eventually to take back their home country. When this would happen, a full-scale war against the Internationale would be unleashed, so it was vital that both Canada and the French Republic would be ready for bloodshed by that time. India, that had drawn some attention to itself due to some aggressive stance towards its neighbors, tried to calm things down by focusing on infrastructure and expanding its rail network. The war between the Emirates seemed a forgotten one, mostly due to the clear outcome, though it did not occur as fast as everyone thought. By now, the war had cost 10,000 people their lives. Britain's leader, Nicholas E. Gleis, focused on the Union's navy. With harsh words coming from Canada during the government's speeches, it was pretty clear that the war to retake the islands could be sensed in the distance. But in order to do this, a fierce navy battle would be held, and thus Gleis vowed to keep their fleet in tip-top shape. The recently elected King of Poland, Karol, made it his first intent to stabilize Poland's civilian economy with the build of new factories and better infrastructure in some of the major cities. He was of the opinion that Poland should be healed and built anew from within. Russia's new leader, Nikolai Bukharin, made steps to reform the army according to a plan developed by Denikin. The plan leaned heavily on mass assault charges. With Denikin's influence seeping through in government decision, the country's stability grew due to a stricter military policy overall. In Australasia, Isaac Isaacs drew forth the question of the unions publicly, meaning socialist members and those part of the workers' organizations and trade unions would show their face. A disturbing thought for those fearing a potential syndicalist uprising, but Isaacs had a trick up his sleeve. After the Weltkrieg, Germany seized the former French Indochina, but stability did not restore until German intervention in 1926 crushed the revolutionaries in South China. Now, Indo-Chinese nationalists and leftists under a coalition government called Viet Minh rose up against the colonial regime. Nguyen An Ninh, the head of Viet Minh, declared the independence of Indo-Chinese Union. After salute to the Internationale and World Revolution, he condemned the brutal German oppression of the proletariats of the world and affirmed the Indo-Chinese workers' commitment to anti-imperialism and the liberation of colonial people. Most observers agreed with German media that these were just pompous peasants. German military force or even polices in the Far East would easily suppress the revolts, or so-called Viet Cong. And so Deutsch-Ostasien declared war on the Indo-Chinese Union. Helmut von Mucke thought he would quickly disperse of the labeled peasants and would not need help from the fatherland or other allies for that matter. With the Malaya pacification, a whole bunch of land forts and bunkers were erected all over the Asian peninsulas that were under the influence of the Reichspakt. But the Viet Cong were ready for this war. An Ninh had spoken about the German oppressor for a long time, and things went exactly according to plan to where the Germans were the one who declared war first, gaining Ninh's forces much support from citizens. For the first days of the conflict, the Viet Cong were able to take much land for their own. As King Edward had previously started the road towards technological research, he made sure to give full governmental support to the National Research Council. The council was founded during the Weltkrieg to advise the Canadian government on science and research. By providing the organization with additional funding and support, both industrial and military research could be expanded. Then in the beginning of September, the war between the Emirates finally came to an end, with the winner being the expected Najd. The main war in Asia also continued and was a complete mess. Where Ma was able to push itself into Tibet a couple of weeks back, this time it was Tibet pushing into theirs. Forces of Ma clique were spread all over Mongolia, but could not get a proper holdfast. Ma had twice the amount of dead as Mongolia and Tibet. The Indo-Chinese Union continued to take land from the Reichspakt in their neighboring state. Though this fueled their spirits with motivation, the truth of the matter was that a war could never be fully won. If Deutsch-Ostasien could not handle it alone, there were many more countries who would send forth its troops. The anti-German speeches by Nin also were heard in the heart of Europe, resulting in the Belgian Declaration of Independence. Sick of German oppression and the disaster of Black Monday, Belgian independence movements throughout the country had been revolting and performing guerrilla strikes on the German army. Due to their own recovery, the German Empire was unable to support Adalbert I to the fullest and has let the situation escalate beyond their control. After coordinated strikes by the independence armies on the city of Mons and Antwerp, they were finally able to push the Flandern-Wallonian army back to Brussels, where after fierce fighting, the German king surrendered. With no clear answer yet from the German Empire, many fear that an independent Belgium might be short-lived, especially with tensions between the Empire and the Commune of France rising and the strategic location of the country. And worrying news kept on coming, this time from America. President Herbert Hoover, whose administration had proven to be incapable of stabilizing the divided country and calming down the CSA and AFP militants, had invited General Douglas MacArthur to take the reins of the country with a junta of military men and corporate representatives. President MacArthur was a strong proponent of an iron fist rule and opposed both syndicalism and American pacifism. Large-scale crackdowns on the enemies of America had already been reported. Najd, having annexed Jabal Shammar, now had turned itself onto a Saudi Arabia led by Abdulaziz ibn Saud. Getting the citizens of former Jabal Shammar to swear allegiance to Saud was tough, but in due time, and with the help of a Saudi hegemony, this would eventually come. The fact that the name Najd was disposed helped make some of the citizens feel part of something new. Nicholas E. Gleis now looked outward. Where his previous endeavors focused on benefiting just the Union of Britain, this time, Gleis wanted to portray Britain's position within the Internationale. The government was woven to the fate of that of the French Commune, yet the spirit of the British was different. The nations would stand side by side while prospering, and this granted Gleis more support from his fellow countrymen. In America, it was awfully quiet. MacArthur continued to step down onto his opposers. Many felt they were soon to be pushed to the point of no return, with horrible consequences as a result. But Europe did not care for this. The Kaiser looked at the success that King Edward had with his radio speech and set forth his own political figures to address the people via the radio. By having their voices heard and reaching directly into the homes of the people, Germany's base stability would rise, which was of the utmost importance for a country that was on the brink of collapse. Though the Indo-Chinese Union continued to move upwards, they got countered and flanked by a naval invasion from troops of Deutsch-Ostasien from one of the many other islands under their control. With all this war brewing in Asia, the Russian Empire knew it was time to modernize their army. In the beginning of November, Isaac's scheme saw the light, as he began to suppress the syndicalists of his nation. With him questioning the Union previously, syndicalists members dared to show their face, making them easy targets for censorship and silencing them. Isaacs directed the government in the exact direction he wanted to. After Edward had finished his political path towards better research, it was time to continue and finish the infrastructural side of things. Besides the Queen Mary Way, a proper rail expansion was in order as well. Then halfway through November, word got out of the elections in Italy. The election within the Republic of Italy had resulted in the election of Prime Minister Gabriele D'Annunzio, head of the Associazione Nazionalista Italiana. The new Prime Minister had quickly discarded the title of Prime Minister for the title of Il Duce, which he said was much more fitting for Italia. In a speech in Milan, he had stated that nothing shall ever stand in the way of Italy's greatness, and that the present Black Monday crisis was due to vile Austrian influence, which would eventually be destroyed by the new legions of Italy. And then, by the end of 1936, some astounding news arrived. A new war seemed to have broken out, but not in Asia, but on American soil. The government received a transmission that the so-called Combined Syndicates of America had declared war on the labeled American Union state, and at the same time, the United States declared war on both these factions. Though this came to a surprise to some, to others, it was a war that was years in the making and had finally been unleashed. The Second American Civil War was about to begin.